See some familiar names there. Welcome. Um, right before I share my slides here, we have a lot to go through, and we're very excited about this year-end payroll season. My name is Mark. I lead our customer success team, and this is our payroll and tax partner, Jim Cole from Czech. And you'll see our pretty faces again here in the slide, but welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who can only be here for maybe 30 minutes, we are going to be sending over the recording afterwards. And also for those of you who missed it, or for those of you who want to send it to colleagues of yours, because we're going to cover a lot of things that are very important. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let me open up the slides. Give me 1 second. Okay, there we are. And just to double check, Jim, can you see my screen? Yes?
Sure can. Looking good, Mark.
All right, awesome. Jim, did you want to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This is going to be my 20th year end in the payroll industry. So, I've seen it all, as you can imagine. I'm always super excited to get out really good information to help customers be prepared to go through. Sometimes folks call it the busiest time of the year. There's a lot of moving parts, but no reason it can't be incredibly successful. And we're going to share a lot of those great tips today. And Mark, can't thank you enough for having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Um, we have a lot to cover, like I mentioned. I'm going to go over a few sections, and then I'm going to pass it off to Jim, starting with the important dates, reminders, and year-end process and policies. And then we'll end up with me, and we'll talk about OBA, One Big Beautiful Bill, OB3, however you want to call it, too, as well, because I know there are some questions about that too. The format of this, we would love for you to ask questions. And we're going to pause at the end of each section to see if there are anything that we can answer about that topic. Um, or if not, then we'll probably answer at some point in the other sections. But we'll go ahead and pause at the end of every section here. There is a chat button in there, or and feel free to message us, the panelists and the host, or you can ask it out loud too as well. There's two options to everyone, and we'll answer both. So really appreciate your engagement. Okay, like Jim mentioned, this is the busiest time of the year for payroll professionals, and it requires a lot of preparation, obviously. And what we're here to provide is to make sure that Workstream customers have the insight, the tools, and the resources for a very smooth year end. So we are here for you. Now, there's a handful of components here that we're going to cover to make sure that you prepare your company for year end. The first is confirming company data. That includes all the federal and state IDs that you need, especially for those of you in our industry here in the restaurant industry. If you open a new location and applied for these IDs, make sure you put them in if you receive them, right? So that's going to be very important. The second in the middle is we're going to show you a preview of how to see a preview of W-2s, and also just to reconfirm, how do we actually have our employees update their delivery preferences if they want a paperless delivery? Number three, any additional payrolls that need to happen, whether that's bonuses or whether you paid somebody through a check and need to input that in, please make sure to add that before the end of the year. And then third, update any employee information, and we'll show you how your employees can do that by downloading the Workstream US app. It's the easiest way to do it. and review any benefit data too as well. Okay, so we do have a filing preparation checklist in Workstream. And this is where you're going to be able to go through a workflow well, and to make sure that you have everything checked off. There's two spots for this actually. And just a friendly reminder too as well. If there are missing crucial information, we won't be able to file for you. And so if you've heard from your customer success manager, if you heard from your support team member by now, we just did the past 2 weeks. I've reached out to all of you. If there is anything missing or anything that may prevent you from a successful filing, we've already reached out to you. If you haven't heard from us, probably a good thing, but I would still double check and go into Workstream to make sure that nothing is missed. Okay, this is where to look in Workstream. This is the team view, as you can see there at the top under the payroll section. And then as you click on review, there will be a pop-up and you'll be able to go through this workflow. If you go to the admin view, this is where it's a lot more detailed. And if you manage multiple EINs, I actually recommend you to go to this view because then it can be more specific to each one of these EINs and see what the issue is. Now, if we haven't reached out to you, like I mentioned, and you're seeing this and you're not able to fix it, please let us know and contact us at support@workstream.is. But as you go through this workflow, you'll be able to see each item and make sure you click on each one. Even if it's a green check, let's double check and make sure you're not missing anything, okay? All right. I'm gonna pause here. Do we have any questions from the crowd? Let's see. Not yet. Everyone feel good about that? Okay. We're gonna move forward here.
You're explaining it too well, Mark. You're not leaving anything open to interpretation.
Or everyone has their IDs and everything's set, right?
Love
Everything's
it.
good. Love
Yeah.
it. Okay, W-2s. We get a lot of questions about W-2s every year. And the first things first, we are uh, going to be uh, doing two things. First is we're going to be delivering those W-2s, automatically generate that for all employees that have been on Workstream payroll throughout the year. And electronically is going to be delivered quicker. But then if there is, obviously if we need to mail them, we're going to try to get them before January 31st. These final W-2s are published 1 week before January 31st. So folks that are waiting for that paper mail are not going to get it until, around that time. So just a heads up. Any copies are also under the company tax documents for record keeping too in Workstream. Okay. Same thing for 1099 as well. We just follow the same process too. All right. Now we're getting into my favorite topic, which is electronic consent. For those of you who have transitioned over to Workstream payroll software, we do not migrate the electronic consent for these W-2s from employees. So if you were in a previous payroll provider and they had consented that they only want electronic, they don't need paper mail. If they've consented to do that in a previous payroll software, once you transition into Workstream, they have to reconsent for that. And so, otherwise, we will print and mail those W-2s if they didn't consent to electronic, and there is a $2 administration fee that we pass off. The good news is, after talking to a few of you, at least this service will be print and mailing it for you. There are some folks there who back in the day will have to print it themselves and mail it themselves. That's not the case here. We will do that for you. So at least that's a plus. And like I mentioned, these are the several ways that we're going to be doing it. Uh, Employees can consent for online delivery through the WorkStream US app. Um, this is the email that I sent over. I have a one pager that includes a QR code in downloading that app. And They have to use the email that they used during onboarding to be able to access the app. And they have to dig through their mailbox too, as well, their email inbox. We're going to go through that in terms of instructions, but that is the best way for them to go in there and update their electronic consent delivery preferences. The other reason why you want them to go through is just in case they moved. Any address changes or anything like that, they can also update there in the app. And Because you don't want to mail it twice. If you mail a W-2s multiple times, that's $2 each time. So we definitely want to make sure that everything is updated in there too as well. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Any corrections and amendments that affect boxes 1 through 13 or 16 through 19, we automatically trigger a new W-2 uh, that's going to be sent out the following Monday. So that's why we're making such a big push in asking your employees log in, make changes if you need to, so that we can that everything is going to be smooth. Because any corrections after that, we have to send a W-2C by the following Monday. And again, another wrinkle to your smooth year end and year start, right? All right, and this is what it looks like in Workstream. You can actually preview your tax return. So what I would recommend, and it's the same workflow as earlier, which is if you go in that review tab and end of your checklist, you can download a few of these just to make sure and double check and audit that everything looks correct. Here is the one pager that was created for you. Please feel free to print this and post it in the back office so that folks know how to download the application. And just again, reminder, can't say it enough, $2 administration fee per paper delivery. And please update preferences by December 31st. All right. One other thing that we've added with actually Jim's help and team is that for those of you who are interested in maybe doing some math and figuring out how much is this going to cost you for some of you have thousands of employees. We did have built-in reports for W-2 paper election. And so you'll be able to see there's going to be a column that says whether they elected or not. And so kind of guesstimate how much it is going to cost you and figure out which employees need to have a friendly reminder to update it. I think we have a few questions rolling around here, so I'm going to pause here. Okay. First question is there a way for me to see if my employees already consented to receive W-2s electronically? Yes, Tina. This is exactly where you can find it under reports. Um, And then where can I find that preview to print and place in our back room for employees to see? We sent that over via email. It's coming from Workstream, and we can resend that over to you, Tina. Let me actually write down your information here and resend that to you just in case you didn't receive it. Okay. Jim, did you want to add anything in this section before I pass it off to you?
No, I think you covered it, Mark. It sounds good, and I know we'll go through a little bit more details on the information that we're looking for to ensure that W-2s are correct in one of the following sections. So,
Okay, perfect. We have another question come in from Simon. Terminated employees' only option is paper delivery of W-2, even if they've consented to e-delivery. Correct. We are going to be sending them paper delivery. There is no option just for e-delivery. So they're going to get both, basically. But because they're terminated for this fiscal year, we have to send them a paper delivery. Okay. All
Got another
right.
question mark.
Oh, okay. Does the system already know who I terminated? Uh, it should, as long as you went ahead and offboarded them on the product. So uh, you have to offboard them in the system in their profile uh, so that you'll be able to, the system will know that you've offboarded them. Perfect. If you did so, you're good to go, Tina. Awesome.
Great. Thanks so much for all the questions, and thanks for covering those first two sections, Mark. What we're going to run through for the next few slides is just important dates and timeline reminders, right? For those of you who, whether this is your first year end or you've been through year end before, time goes quick, right? It's going to escape you. So one thing you definitely want to be aware of is we have a bunch of holidays that we're going to be navigating over the next 2 months. So, number one, Christmas, it's a Thursday this year. Banks will be closed that day, which means any payrolls approved that day, money will not be moved until the following day. And then you cannot date any checks on the holiday as well, right? So, that'll be true for Christmas at the end of this month. Moving over into January, New Year's Day is January 1st, also a Thursday. Again, you can't date checks that month and you can't approve payroll on that day and expect it to move. You can approve it that day, but no money will move until the following business day. MLK Day will be January 19th, so that's going to be hot on the heels of New Year's Day. And then very quickly after that, you're going to have President's Day, right? So just a couple holidays just to keep in the back of your mind. Certainly want folks to enjoy them, but those are going to be dates that you're going to want to potentially approve around. If we go to the next slide, we can see a display of exactly how this will work with whatever timeline you're using for approving payrolls. So this is going to be unique to you and just something you're going to want to keep in mind as you're approving with these holidays coming up, right? So using Christmas at the end of the month as an example, if you're approving payroll on a next day, in order to have it be paid out that Friday, which would be December 26th, it needs to be approved on Wednesday, the 24th, right? So it needs to be approved the day before the holiday, and then it will land the day after the holiday. If you're on accelerated or 2-day processing, you're definitely going to approve that payroll on Tuesday to have that paid out Friday. And then, of course, anybody who's approving on that 3-day timeline, you're going to be pushed back a day and you're going to approve on Monday to have that paid out on Friday, right? And in all cases, what we're trying to do is navigate the holiday, right? Because no funds will move on those days. So just being aware of that. If we move forward to the next slide, New Year's Day is literally going to be the week right after Christmas, and it's the same day, right? So you're just going to be following that same pattern. You're going to do that 2 weeks in a row if you're a weekly processor, right? If you process payroll weekly, if you're bi-weekly, you're probably going to run into one of these. So we just want you to be prepared for that. Just make sure you're planning to approve on the right day, that you don't end up in a situation where you forget to approve it timely. If that does happen, of course, we can always facilitate a wire to make sure that folks do get paid. But try to avoid that. You're aware now. Mark it on your calendar so you are approving timely with the holidays coming up. Moving forward, a few other dates just for you to keep in mind. At the end of this week, we're hoping to receive any corrections requests for anything from the first, second, or third quarter of this year, right? So anything that might have happened prior to the fourth quarter that needs to be corrected, please let us know as soon as possible so we can do our best to get that facilitated before W-2s are created, right? Anything that we receive this week, we'll definitely get those done before the end of the year. Of course, the fourth quarter is active. We are currently in the fourth quarter. So any mistakes or things that need to be corrected throughout this month, obviously just send them in as soon as you identify them, right? So we can get that updated and that very first W-2 will be perfect. We already talked about the holiday on the 25th. Two things I want you to know about the last day of the year, right? This is the last calendar day, December 31st. That's the final payday of 2025. That means anything that is paid out up to that day will be included on 2025 filings, right? So that'll be included on any 2025 W-2s, any of your year-end or quarter-end reports for 2025. Saying that back to you, even if somebody works December 1st to December 31st and their first payday is January 2nd, that is going to be considered 2026 wages, right? So the last payday for 2025 is the 31st, right? So just making sure that you're aware of that. And then the 31st will also be the last date to have employees or contractors select to receive electronic delivery of their year-end form, right? So of their W-2 or of their 1099. We're going to flip the calendar, pop some champagne, and now we are in the new year, right? This is 2026. So you're going to be reporting wages now for the new year. January 1st, not a payday. We already discussed that. January 2nd will be the first payday. It is a Friday this year, so you can start dating payrolls for that day. Remember, everything's going to reset on January 1st, right? So any wage bases that have been met, um, any uh, any benefits where you might have met the annual limit, HSA, FSA, 401k, for example, those are all going to reset in the new year, right? So that very first payroll of the year, whether it's the second or the week after, you're going to start to see more funds come out, right? Because you're probably going to start federal unemployment again. You're probably going to restart state unemployment again. So just being aware of that when you approve that very first payroll so you don't get shocked. On January 12th, we are going to upload your quarter end reports for the fourth quarter, right? So you're going to get your employer copies of the tax returns that we will file on your behalf. So you'll see all of the numbers that happen throughout the fourth quarter. You'll get copies of those. Whether you want to save them or hand them off to your accountant, whatever process you take, some folks just put them in a filing cabinet and shove them away. Whatever you prefer to do, you can do that. And then on the 12th, that's when they will be populated. On the 19th, if for whatever reason you end up in a situation where you have an NSF, right, insufficient funds event prior to the end of the year, if you do not fulfill that payment, right, get that back in balance, as long as you get that back in balance before the 19th of January, we'll do the very first run to sweep and catch up anybody who was in an NSF situation. Saying that differently, if you fund every payroll timely, you're in a good position. If for whatever reason you run into an issue with funding, certainly you can reach out. But just letting you know that as long as those funds are back in balance by the 19th, we'll do our first sweep and create returns, obviously, for you at that point. W-2s and 1099s will be available at latest on the 24th. They may be populated earlier. It just depends as we go through and get those filed. But the 24th, they're guaranteed to be posted. On the 30th, we'll do that final review of any companies that may have had an NSF, and finally we're able to fund that. And then make sure we'll get those filings for them. And then January 31st is the last day to distribute W-2s and 1099s for 2025, right? So anybody who's electronic, they'll have already had their copy a week at that point, right? Making sure that they're accessing it. And then anybody who received a paper return, those will have already been sent out and postmarked ahead of the 31st, right? So they should get that copy that way. I will pause here if there are any questions on the dates that we just ran through. I know that was a lot of information, but hopefully it all makes sense and we're ready to navigate the next few weeks together. I think we're feeling good.
We're
All
feeling
right,
good.
let's move
All right.
into some important reminders now. So, some important reminders. These are going to be things that you're going to want to think about right now, right? For this month, right? These are going to be the things that, if this is true for you or something you need to consider, you're going to want to start thinking about it as soon as possible to make sure that you're either setting up a separate payday to get these things included, or you're updating that information. Again, why? Because we want it in the system by the 31st of December to be included on all of the quarter end and year end filings, and of course, the W 2s for employees. So, number one, employees should be checking their own information, right? Making sure that they have their legal name, making sure that their social security number is up to date. If they are receiving a paper W 2, making sure it's going to the right address, right? We don't want to end up in one of those situations where they were living with an ex and all of a sudden they broke up and now the W 2 goes to the wrong house. We don't want that, right? So making sure they're updating their address today if they are going to get a paper copy. By the way, if a paper copy is undeliverable, right, if that does go to the ex's house and they say, hey, return to sender, that will go back to the company's main address, right, their legal address. So it'll be delivered to the company, and then they can either call the employee or distribute it to them directly. Depends on, obviously, the situation for the employee. So employee information is number one, making sure employees are updating that social security numbers, legal name, addresses. Those are the big ones. Terminated employees, right? Some of you became WorkStream customers this year. Congratulations, you made a wonderful choice. And if any of your terminated employees were not migrated, this is the time to double check that, right? Remember earlier when I said the very first payday in January counts for 2026 wages? Well, that was true of 2025 as well. That very first payday in 2025 counts for 2025 wages. So if you had an employee that maybe only worked one payday in January, just making sure that you know if they have a W 2 preview available. If not, now is the time to call that out, right? Let us know if a terminated employee, for whatever reason, might not have been migrated, just assuming that you want to follow up with them, right? Because the worst situation is when they call on February 1st and they say, I never got my W 2 for the 2 weeks I worked, right? So getting ahead of that now, if that's true for your company. Moving on, we're going to talk about imputed income, right? Imputed income is when we take the value of something and we put it on a paycheck so it gets taxed appropriately, right? One of the ones you're going to want to think about is potentially third-party sick pay, also known as disability, right? If any employees went out on disability throughout the year, and you may have been using a disability provider that was paying them directly, but those need to be recorded. We certainly want to get those in before the end of the year. Or if any of the owners of a company are a 2% shareholder and they need their benefits recorded. I'm going to put a pin in that and we're going to double click on that in 1 second. The other imputed income I want to make sure that you're thinking about is potentially group term life if you offer that, right? Group term life, the value over $50,000 is an imputed income amount, right? Usually a very small amount that is added to an employee's wages. It's included in box 12, I think code C, and there is Social Security and Medicare that they would have to pay on behalf of that. The reason I'm specifically calling out imputed income is because you need to run it with a standard payroll to ensure that there are taxes are able to be deducted from it, right? So imputed income cannot be run by itself because there's no value to pull the taxes from. So you would want to be thinking about running this with an actual pay cycle before the end of the year. It's only December 3rd. I'm sure you have a couple pay cycles coming up. So making sure you're thinking about when you would want to put that in. Again, only if this is true for your business. Now, let's double click on that third party sick pay and 2% shareholder by going to the next slide. And you can see that third party sick pay, right, or disability, these come in different flavors and it is going to be based on your disability provider. I highly recommend speaking to them if you need to. Otherwise, in some cases, the disability provider might be providing the W 2 to the employee. If it's not true, and the disability provider is saying, we need you to record the taxes, that needs to be entered into the payroll system before the end of the year. Please send in a ticket and reach out and let us know. We'll make sure that that is recorded appropriately. And then for 2% shareholders, right? These are typically owners of the company that need their benefits to be recorded before the end of the year. If that is the case, please let us know, right? Because those are taxable for 2% shareholders, right? Us, common folk, we get benefits. They're pre-tax, good for us. Owners, 2% shareholders, there's a taxable event for those. So we do want to make sure those are recorded before the end of the year. Let's move forward and we're going to talk about some company information that you're going to want to just make sure is updated. So any state account ID numbers, if they are in applied for status, now is the time to make sure you're either following up with those states or finally putting that information in. The reason that I harp on this time of year is because that appears on the W-2, right? Nothing is worse as an employee than getting a W-2 where it says that the state you've been contributing taxes to all year, there's an applied for ID. Are they even sending my money in? Right? An employee will have questions. So try to get those IDs in. If you did open up in a new state or you did have an employee working across state lines and need to make sure that those IDs are in the system, again, they do appear on the W-2. You should get them in general because they are included in quarterly returns. But again, they do have that W-2 component that makes them a little bit more important this time of year. And then workplaces, right? This is a good time to clean up any workplaces that maybe are no longer active, especially if they have a state with them where maybe you're no longer sending taxes, right? So if you do need to close any accounts, right, this is the time to go through, review that, make sure those things are updated, right? So those are at the company level. You want to be thinking about those things. And in general, what is the goal of all of this? It's just the best hygiene possible going into quarter end and year end filing. So let's go to our final reminder here, which is payments. So I know that sometimes payments are recorded outside of the payroll system, right? You give somebody $100 cash bonus, right? Some of you might even have some holiday parties coming up where everybody gets, a stack of cash. You want to make sure that that is recorded in the system so that that can be taxed appropriately, right? So any manual checks that were recorded outside of the system, you definitely want to make sure that those are included because we want them to appear on the W-2s for the employees, right? And this can be any payment that was made outside of the system, right? Holiday bonus is just an easy example, but any payment that you're making to an employee that would need to be included on their W-2, now is the time to think about that because again, you want to make sure you have time to run it before the end of the year. And then contractors, right? I know contractors, they come in all different forms. Sometimes you're paying them directly. Maybe you're paying them through Venmo. Maybe they come in and again, grab a bag of cash from you. Whatever situation you want to make sure that you're recording those payments in the system. You can put them in as manual. And then that way they still get that 1099 NEC at the end of the year, right? The 1099 non-employee compensation form, right? We want to make sure that they're able to get a copy of that. And we can only create those if we have the payments that are made to them recorded in the system. So I'll pause there before we go into our important, our next section. Any questions? Yep. I have a question about an employee that is not paid through WorkStream. Um, do you want to say more about that? Meaning that the employee is paid outside of the payroll system? I think in general, what I'll say is any employee that is paid outside of the system for whatever reason, if they are truly an employee and they do need to be, they had her do a 1099 pay. Okay, yeah, definitely. If you do want to have the 1099 created by WorkStream, definitely make sure you record any payments that were paid to the employee throughout the year. They should also fill out their W-9 so that they can have that information in the system, right? And this is only if you want to have the 1099 created by WorkStream. Great question. Okay, so if Ceteris is going to create the 1099 for them, then I think you're in an okay situation. This is only, yeah, I think that's right. Thank you, Tina. All right, let's move forward. I know we're a little tight on time here. Okay. For terminated employees or any who opt for W-2 delivery if they have moved houses, then where will the return W-2s go? They will
Mm,
go to the legal address on file for the company, right? So they'll be returned to the company, and then the company will be able to either remail them to the right address or have the employee come and pick them up as needed, right? So whatever situation makes the most sense for them. But they will be returned to the return address, which is the legal address for the company. Great question. Let's keep going here. And we'll talk about some year-end processes and policies. So number one, uh, with the deadlines for the end of the year, all quarterly returns are going to be posted when? January 12th. But we may be posting some returns later, right? And these are annual returns that have a later filing date. If you do work in a state that has an annual filing, that may be posted a little bit later than normal. Um, Obviously, whatever situation, we are always following the state's guidance and we are always filing those timely, right? So that's your guarantee that those will always be submitted on time. But some states, again, have an annual filing that does have a later submission date, and we'll take advantage of that if that is the case. So you may see certain annual returns pop up in February just for awareness. Um, we only want to file for companies that expect to be filed for, right? So saying that differently, if a company is terminated and they do not want to have year-end processed for them, we would have closed them off with the final filing quarter would have been the third quarter. If anyone on this call, I hope it's not the case, but if you are going out of business or closing before the end of the year and you expect us to create those returns, please obviously let us know. If for whatever reason a company was closed for involuntary termination, right, or funding failure issues, we will not file on their behalf, right? Our assumption is that they've moved over to another provider. We obviously want to make sure that we have those IDs, right? We talked a little bit about this earlier because they do appear on the W-2s, but I did want to call out that certain states will not accept applied for with filing, right? So in some cases, we're unable to file on your behalf if we only have applied for in the system. So we truly, truly want to make sure that we're getting those IDs before the end of the year to ensure that we have successful Q4 filings. Cool. And then if you do get those tax IDs, but maybe you get a little later into January, just go ahead and either let us know or update them in the system. Either way, once we get that, we'll go ahead and kick off a refile and get that out the door. If for whatever reason there's any other reason that you had a failed filing, could be an invalid ID, could be an already filed error, whatever the issue, we want to make sure that we're resolving those quickly so that we can get that refiling back out the door. So once we let you know of any failed filings or blocked filings, please make sure you're doing your best to unblock those as soon as possible.
perfect. I'll pause here just in case we have any questions about
Yep.
filing or refiling. Okay. I'm going to move forward to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OB3. Um,
Yep.
so there's several new and expanded tax deductions here beginning in 2025. Most of them are going to be, obviously personal. The ones that you may get questions about are going to be the deductions for qualified overtime and tips. So that's the important one here, especially for those in the restaurant industry, right, or hourly workforce. So right now for 2025, we're not going to be sending an updated, form or anything like that. That's going to be the IRS are going to be updating that to show up in the W-2s next year. So this year, it's not going to be itemized, let's say. With that said, there are going to be ways for every one of your employees to actually figure that out themselves, and you can point them out in their last pay stub. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide and show you where that is. But a couple things to note here. Um, again, a reminder: no updates for the Form W-2, 1099, or 941, or any other payroll tax forms. Everything's staying the same 2025. The federal income tax withholding tables remain unchanged, and employers and payroll providers should continue using 2024 procedures. I mentioned earlier that for 2026, those forms are going to be updated by the IRS. Also, we are going to have updates in our reporting for tips and overtime pay too in the system as well for 2026. So that's something to look forward to. Now, for those employees who are probably going to be knocking on your door and asking questions, um, you know, heading into when they file for their taxes, you can point them to their last pay stub, and their last pay stub will actually show the year-to-date earnings. And there's going to be two sections in there. We underlined it here: the overtime total and then the cash tips total. So feel free to point them out. Again, this is accessible on the Workstream US app, so they can use that in case they have any questions or want to apply that for their filings this year.
I think that's well said, Mark. The one thing that I would just share with this is a lot changed quickly with this. Um, the reason that the IRS posted the guidance for, no updates, no changes here, and to follow the previous year's um, uh, process is because they want employees to, if they want to claim it, it's up to them, right? It's on them to go ahead and claim it. They're trusting that the employees are aware that they are in a covered industry. I think most of you are probably going to be okay there because hospitality is one of the ones that was mentioned, or any industry where tipping is customary, right? So in most cases, I think your employees are probably going to be in a safe world. But I would recommend that if any employee does ask, I would suggest they do speak to an accountant if they do want to claim this, right? Because there are a few other provisions. It's not all pre-tax, right? It's only up to a certain amount for the year. I think it's $12,500, or it's right about there for tips for overtime. And then it's only up to a certain amount that the employee can make annually, right? I think it's $130,000, and then they have the ability to claim those exemptions, right? So there's a lot of moving parts. To Mark's point, no forms have been updated, so we can't give those accurate values because the IRS has just not given payroll companies or any filing changes that would accurately have us be able to show these visibly to any of the employees. Right. So any employee that does attempt to go this year, it is on them, right? I hope everybody on this call doesn't feel responsible to all of a sudden become an accountant. I know it's going to be hard. I know you're going to get questions, but do want to continue to say that, please don't advise, just, let employees know here's where they can find that information if they do want to make that claim by themselves.
We have a question here,
Nobody,
Jim.
yeah, nobody's forced to claim, Tina. So it's completely up to them when they do their own filing. Yep, great question. Sorry about that, Mark. Let's move forward. I know we're getting tight. That
We have
that's
one.
correct, Kathy. Yeah, a lot of states for the first time have actually moved away from the way the IRS is doing something, which is another reason that I would do my best to kind of stay out of the conversation as best as possible, because a couple states have already filed different ways to split from the way the federal guidance has been stated. So it's a moving target, and it's very hard to advise clearly. So I would recommend people talk to their accountant when filing as often as you can. And I know that's a hard one.
All right. Just a friendly reminder, I think we've talked about fees a couple of times already here, and at the end of the day, we'll work with you, obviously, and this is the whole reason why we're trying to get everything correct by year end, so that we don't need to be talking about fees in case we need to do any refilings or any of that nature, right? So, but these are the fees that we have, and hopefully none of you experience that. Um, in any case, okay, support. Uh, we're going to be fully staffed. This is our busy period, and we want to make sure you're taken care of. So we're available for chat Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time, and Saturday and Sunday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. We're a phone call away. The times are there too as well, and you can always email us at help@workstream.is. We also have a payroll knowledge base that you are all familiar with, hopefully. So please feel free to check that out in case you have any questions in there. Um, and then, last but not least, my favorite slide. We're here for you, and this is not the entire workstream team. I tried to get as many headshots as I could yesterday. There are a lot more of us here, but this is some of us. I'm sure you're familiar with a few of us here, and we really appreciate your business, and we really thank you. Um, we have a question. Can terminated employees still get paperless W-2? Yes, if they elected to do so on the Workstream platform, they will get paperless, but because they are terminated, they also will get paper as well. So they get both.
We got one more question mark, which I think the answer is yes, but everybody is going to get a copy of this presentation. That's correct?
Correct. Yes,
Beautiful.
we will be sending that out within a day or so, including the webinar. Yep. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else. No, that's all right. Well, we're almost right on time at 10:48. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much. Like I said, we'll be sending up some follow-ups here in the next day or two. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you coming through.
Yeah, this was
And
wonderful. Thank you so much.
happy year end, everybody.
Happy year end.